Is Jalen Hurts getting even more heat right now? Remember earlier this week, a big story came out suggesting mounting frustration with the organization over Hurts's coachability issues. Well, now former Eagles scout, our guy John Middlecoff, believes that this issue could potentially lead Philly shipping him out of town. Take a listen.
I think the Eagles are doing this as like, it's on, man. You either shape up or you shape out. Here's the thing about Jalen Hurts. He's not like a bad guy. He's always in shape. He works hard. He's extremely serious. But as you can see in there, quarterback is a very nuanced situation. I think they're putting this out there because they want it to be known, like, this is not going to be tolerated anymore. I know you're making a lot of money, but you've seen before, we got rid of a guy to put you in there. If you don't think we will do this again, you're dealing with the wrong people because we will not hesitate.
You know, Rachel, we say on this show, and John nails this, stuff gets out when people want it out. You're a reporter.
Yep.
Okay. You've had more than a few people share things, and you probably walked away and went, oh, they want that out.
Yep.
You didn't have to dig too hard.
Nope.
I think this is the classic. Philadelphia just wants it known. We're all on the clock here. We're all on the clock.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Lurie has come out since all this, you know, sort of has bubbled and been like, you know, we support him. But actions over words. Next season is the only fully guaranteed season on Jalen's contract, and they are not extending him this offseason. That's all the reporting. So that tells you, I mean, do you think the Eagles should consider moving off him?
Well, I think, again, I think a lot of times in the NFL, there's some certainties. We know Herbert's great. We know Burrow's great. We know Josh, Lamar, Mahomes. There's guys we know. I think Fernando Mendoza, after this year, you're going to go, wow, that's what a franchise guy looks like. And then there's guys like, you know, you go back and forth. Sam Darnold, is this real? I'm not. C.J. Stroud, I thought he was great. Maybe he's not. Jalen Hurts. Then I think there's got Baker Mayfield. How good is he? Is he coordinator dependent? I think we have, at any one time in my life, I've always felt like there's about 5 quarterbacks that everybody just knows. You wouldn't even pick up a phone call if you were a GM. You wouldn't even pick the phone up.
Right.
And then there's another 5 guys that you would never call another GM, but if somebody called you and asked, would you consider? And I think that's the situation. And then there's 15 quarterbacks you would make a call to see if you could move them. I don't think Jalen's there yet because he's had too much postseason success.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you got a new OC coming in there this season, and he's going to be asked to be more flexible than he has had to be in the last couple seasons. And that's the criticism of him and all these stories that are coming out is he's not flexible. So I think it is a make or break season for him in Philadelphia. We'll have to see. I want to get back to...
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm actually really super excited to talk about this because I get to show my unbiased lens. I talk about this all the time about being unbiased and being grounded and let's have real conversations, yada yada yada. And especially considering I talk so positively about Jalen Hurts and defend him like crazy and people are like, you're so biased towards Jalen Hurts. You're so biased towards the Eagles. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And so this is where I'm really excited to be able to literally show you examples of this in real time. And we talked about this before and I've talked about this before and I said this after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And someone who I talk to all the time who's a big Eagles fan, I said, buddy, I said, listen, man, the moment the things don't go well this coming season, which was last season, I was like, people will be calling for Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. I was like, they are always on a warm/hot seat like that is. And he goes, no way. No way. And then we kind of saw how last season went and he conceded and was like, no, yeah, you were right. And this is the continuation of all of this. And this is what I had said. I made a whole video about it when everybody started to get really high on Tanner McCool. And I said, listen, I think Tanner McCool could actually genuinely be legit. And I said, this is what we're going to find out. Because I said, the Eagles are one of the best well-run franchises out there. And if Harry Roseman sees it and knows, dude, Tanner McCool is legit and Jalen Hurts is actually holding this team back because of play, because of his limitations as a quarterback, etc., etc. I was like, Harry Roseman isn't going to be like, well, there's nothing I could do. We paid him money and he got us in multiple Super Bowls. Like, that's not the way it works. That's just not the way it works. And so my whole video about that was, and I actually went through a news, through an article about like, I think it was after the Chargers game, and the writer said, he made an argument why the Eagles maybe should have started Tanner McCoo in the second half, I forget, and so I actually, broke that down, and he actually responded. He goes, "Wow, I can't believe you're actually, reacting to one of my articles. It was actually really cool," and I was like, "Yo, this is cool for me to see that the person who wrote the article is actually commenting on the video." It was a pretty cool, moment, honestly. But, for me, sports is the ultimate equalizer. It is the ultimate, you either put up or you don't. You either belong or you don't. And I said this, and this is what I try to emphasize, like even Patrick Mahomes, if he starts playing bad and terrible and his completion percentage is just in the gutter and he's throwing interception after, like, you eventually are like, it's time for us to move on, right? Like, it no matter who you are, and so Jalen Hurts is of course not immune to that at all. I mean, like, we have these conversations, and listen, Lamar Jackson has obviously come up short in the playoffs, all that fun stuff, and I know Jalen Hurts hasn't. Jalen Hurts has risen to the occasion. And again, if this is your first ever video watching me, like, go check my record on Jalen Hurts, man. Go. Nobody will ever say that I come in, aggressively against Jalen Hurts. No one could ever argue that, but like there's converse, that you have people in the media contemplating, like, is it time for the Ravens to move on from Lamar? Should they trade Lamar to the Raiders and this and that? And like Colin was like, I don't know, this sounds interesting. And it's like, you start to have all of those conversations. So, like it's all on the table, and especially with the Eagles, and it is the thing that I respect about the Eagles so much. They constantly want to compete and win no matter what. They take care of their players. They treat them well. They pay them their money. They give them their guarantees. And they give them opportunities to win season after season after season. The fans are great. Players love to play in Philly. They love the fan base. Go ask Max Crosby. Go ask any of them. They'll all tell you that they love to play there. But it's also like, if you're here, you actually have a legitimate chance to win you. But it's just, you got to compete. You got to compete. You got to compete. You got to compete. And if the Eagles reached any type of conclusion, Jalen Hurts is actually holding this team back, then yes, I'm not saying it'll be Tanner McCoo, but like, moves will be made, like it will happen. Although, again, everybody always uses the Carson Wentz as an example. They wanted to keep Carson Wentz, that's why they fired Doug Peterson, like they wanted to keep Carson Wentz, and then it didn't work out that way. But it was, they obviously did draft Jalen Hurts in the second round. So like, it was definitely like, kind of like, I think my gut tells me, and you hear kind of different directions about it. It's always the aftermath of it all, is sometimes you get a lot of accurate statements. Sometimes you get kind of like revisionist history. My gut tells me that just Carson just kept getting hurt, and they were just kind of like, we need a backup plan. We need something here. But they weren't necessarily drafting Jalen to replace Carson. And then again, I just think the way how things unfolded, that's obviously what happened. But I don't think that was the master goal. That wasn't that to me, that's not what the main intention necessarily was. But the team obviously knows how to adapt. They know how to make adjustments on the fly. And so, yeah, and his is what I had also said about Tanner McCoo, because, I said we'll kind of find out like what they do with Tanner McCoo. If they're still holding on to Tanner McCoo, well, then that means they're like, yeah, we don't want to part ways with him. We're not ready to let this kid go right now. Like, that signals something to you as well. Again, I think Jalen Hurts deserves a tremendous amount of credit for so many different reasons. I've already made that video a million times, obviously, as you know, and there'll be other opportunities to do that. So, like I don't feel the need to have to split this video and now go on a whole rant about all the positives of Jalen and you know what Jalen brings and look what he's done in the playoffs and this that and the third and you know go through all the stats he's you know completion percentage and passer rating. Like I'm not going to do all that cause I've already done that. And I actually already have a video that will be that posted yesterday about all of that. So like I'm not going to just keep making the same video. I like to look at everything from all the angles. I'm a firm believer in looking at things 360 degrees whether it's positive, negative, whether it's uncomfortable, whatever it may be. I think that's how you ultimately find the truth. So I have no problem. Again, this is why it's so important for me to be as consistent and unbiased and grounded as you can because then it gives you to be able to have these conversations without it coming off of you just being a hater or bias or negative or blah 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 blah, all the fun words. And yeah, you know, and this is what I'd always say anytime anyone says, oh, you know, you're so biased for Jalen or this. One of my things I always come back to where I say the moment Jalen Hurts isn't good, the moment I reach the conclusion that Jalen Hurts is not good enough or that he's holding the team back or that the Eagles need to move on from him, I'll be the first one to say it, I'll be making videos and talking about it and say it's time for the Eagles to move on. Like I am not beholden to any of that. No individual player, no individual team. I keep saying that the Eagles are one of the best well-run franchises of the last like 20 or so years, 30 years, whatever it is. And I always say the moment they're not right, the moment Hy Roseman is making bad deals and Jeffrey Lurie is a bad owner, like I'll say that, right? Like I just call it how I see it. That is what I really stick to the best of my abilities. And so, you know, listen, this conversation about Jalen is definitely getting a little wild. And that's why I really am excited to see what Sean Mannion does. And to be very firm and on the record, I do believe it will work. And I do believe that the Eagles will have success with Jalen Hurts. And I think, you know, we can talk about how great this Eagles man and this that and the third, but his ability to rise up and genuinely rise and answer the call against, you know, in the biggest moments, that really does matter to me. That really has to matter. When we've seen all these other quarterbacks, regardless of who was on their team, regardless of who their coach was, we see them do things where you're just like, man, the moment is getting to you. I remember I got slapped in the face with this because I didn't think it would happen. And it was Josh Allen in the AFC Championship game, that opening drive. And it was just kind of like I was like, I don't like this and like Josh Allen settled down and made awesome plays and I don't blame Josh Allen for even losing that game and defend him in that game as well. But like there were moments especially like I said in that opening drive where I'm just like no Josh no like nobody like settle down like what are you doing right now? Like it was like kind of like he got lucky. He could have easily thrown in an interception in the opening drive and it was just like buddy you got to chill. You got to chill. And Nick Wright himself has even conceded Patrick Mahomes in the beginning of these Super Bowls, in the beginning of some of these games, isn't necessarily at his best. And so, like, I've seen Jalen Hurts rise to that occasion. And he deserves credit. Snorts, he deserves credit for it. You know, whereas we see other quarterbacks, Lamar, Josh, Mahomes, Burrow, the Pies, the Bakers, name all the names you want. We've seen them have lots of moments when you're just like, you know, and the closest you get to that with Jalen is the fumble in the Super Bowl, people like, oh, well, that's why they lost. And it's like, that's nonsense because all these quarterbacks in Super Bowls, all like again, Patrick Mahomes has got 1 million turnovers in Super Bowls. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, like they Joe Burrow, all of them, go look at all the playoff games and their records and there's plenty of turnovers. So, it's going to happen to a degree, but it's just like what is the rate of it? How did it unfold? Does it happen constantly? Does it happen regularly? Is it happening multiple times in the same game? Etc., etc., etc. And Jalen Hurts has successfully answered those questions. Again, In a game that was a mess against the 49ers in the playoffs during a season that was a mess offensively, Jalen Hurts actually genuinely answered the call in that game. And to me, that is another like you can knock Jalen all you want, but it's like that actually is really impressive. Like people tried to use that as a reference of like see they're not good. And it's like I don't think you actually really understand the resilience that Jalen Hurts showed in that game. Like it's actually if you get past your own bias, you can actually be like that's actually more impressive than you're really willing to give credit for. And it's just like especially when the following weekend we see a bunch of quarterbacks just really I mean like again whether it's Caleb whether it was Josh Allen like you're just kind of like see Stroud you're just like see Drake May you're like Jalen Hurts didn't look like that has to count for something. It does. And so when you are evaluating a quarterback that does have to count for something. But if you really are reaching this conclusion well this offense is being held back. Yes, this quarterback rises to the occasion those moments and that is impressive and that is important, but this team is so good that if we could just open up the playbook like if some of the true statements about like he's holding him back the play calling etc that it's more Jalen driven and that is something that you have to seriously consider. Now I'm not going to take it so far where now you automatically assume like let's say there is another quarterback that doesn't do that, right? Let's not go to the Josh Allens and the Lamars and the Mahomes. Like, let's go to the Brock Purdy's and the Bakers. What I always firmly draw that line, people automatically say, see if Brock Purdy was on the Eagles all or if Baker or Dak or these other quarterbacks were on the Eagles, they would have won the Super Bowls. They would do this. And it's just like there's actually no reason to believe. Again, we've seen Brock Purdy on a stacked team. Saw him in the Super Bowl, and he did not elevate his game. That's why I always use as an example. He did not elevate his game. He didn't play bad. He played good enough to win the Super Bowl. And I don't blame him for why they lost the Super Bowl, but he did not elevate. There's no denying it. There was no elevation. Whereas we've seen genuine elevation with Jalen Hurts. And it's just like that's why I want to try to keep emphasizing. It's like that has to count for something. How much when it's all said and done, that ends up being like the literal $200-some million question. Honestly, is it better to have a quarterback that elevates in the most important moments but technically holds you back or playing with a quarterback who can expand the offense, but it's kind of dicey in the biggest moments because of just how they play, right? Like, it's a fascinating conversation and I'm not saying that you even have to choose one or the other or that it's actually a legitimate issue with Jalen Hurts. We're going to find out. And so, I'll just end here in saying that as long as Jalen keeps performing and playing great, I'm going to believe in him. If the conclusion and the evidence suggests that he is genuinely holding this Eagles team back, I will absolutely positively talk about it and I will absolutely positively support them moving on and getting a quarterback that can, that can be better because that's just the way sports works. And it's tough, but it's like just the way it is, man. Everybody will get moved on. Whether you're Peyton Manning, whether you're Patrick Mahomes, whether you're Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, just name every single name. Name every single name. It's not unprecedented. Like, it's just the way how sports works, which is what's honestly pretty awesome in a lot of ways. I'm glad that's not necessarily 100% how life works because I think there's more of a gray area in other aspects of life, but when it comes to sports, just the way it works, they're well compensated. They get to live pretty extraordinary lives. They get to play sports and get to live things that we could only ever dream of. And that's kind of the cost of business. And having these types of conversations publicly is the cost of business. And, it just is what it is. And I also take solace in these types of conversations knowing that like Jalen is unfazed by all this and I find it incredibly inspiring. Like I find Jalen's approach to all this incredibly inspiring. And I talk about how like man if I had a little bit of that mentality in me like I'd be suffering a lot less, a lot less emotional stress. But I'm very emotional. I'm very up and down. So I feel the highs and oh do I feel those lows. And Jalen doesn't. And so I just think this is all part of potentially adding to the legend of Jalen Hurts. If this is another story, another aspect, another obstacle that he overcomes, right? He wins another Super Bowl MVP, he has an awesome season this coming season. It's just another moment when we all get to say remember how we talked about all last summer how the Eagles were gonna move on from him and he's not good enough and how Colin said Josh Allen I know Lamar I know Joe Burrow I know well Jalen Hurts has another Super Bowl he's got 2 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs so what are you going to say now he's been to 3 Super Bowls and Lamar hasn't been to any like it just adds all more fun and fuel and energy to all of that and I'm all for that but those are just my thoughts I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles and this conversation about how they will not hesitate to move off of Jalen? Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. As it really does help visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much.